Physical access, practical physical access and exploitation. How many people here know about physical access? Are you in physical access, physical security? Anybody here work for a physical security vendor? You do? Do you work for, who do you work for?
No.
Okay. I don't have to kick anybody out. That's good. Okay, that was where I was leading. When I say practical, when we approach this as pen testers, typically what I find in this community is that we've looked at it for a few days, or we found a client, we found an opportunity, we went in, we learned all we can, and we made a lot of progress. And we're able to go ahead and hack or clone their physical access control system or their card. Okay? Success in one organization doesn't mean you're going to have success in the next. And so when I say practical, my background is currently, well, for the past 10 years, I've been focused on authentication, advanced authentication, identity management, federation, and trust frameworks. So I have my own independent vendor-neutral company, produce reports. I don't take money from vendors. And so what my background is, I've worked for a lot of vendors. I've got acquired by vendors that have a lot of this IP. I've gone through a lot of implementations, full life cycle of 3 years, where they put things, how they do it, how they implement it, own the responsibility of it. So when you own the full life cycle of a project, you're not just going in and pen testing for a month, 2 or 12 months. You like really see what's going on and understand, like, why was it done that way? And you see it next time, the next time, the next time. And I consulted with a pretty large chunk of the Fortune 1000 market around what they have, what they do, what doesn't work. A lot of them don't listen. We'll get to that later. But some of them are starting to listen. Okay. So with that, there's a couple of problems in the industry right now. Okay. We rely on cloning. We rely on electronic attacks to the physical access control system. But most people in this room don't know how physical access control systems operate. They operate differently than applications that you deal with every day. We're going to get into that so you understand that. Second thing is you revert to cloning. Cloning only gets you so far. So what do you do when cloning doesn't work? You resort to resource-intensive methods if you have a contract you really need to perform. This is true. Okay, so when I was on the vendor side, I was getting calls from people asking me all these questions. I didn't know who they were, but eventually I got a call back from somebody who's like, look, man, I'm a pen tester. I called you a couple months ago, gave you great information. I called like 20 other people. Man, they didn't know what the hell they were talking about. So I'm just going to admit I'm a pen tester, and here's the information I need. And I said, that's cool, because I'm out there trying to go ahead and change the way people think about this stuff to try to get the vendors to improve what they're building, because they're not listening. So yeah, I'll give you the information and enable you to do this. He's like, great, because a few months ago, if I'd known you a few months ago, I wouldn't have had to go ahead and rent this truck and paint it as a UPS truck and ship somebody into shipping and receiving. But the deal is, when you go ahead and take a pen test, they don't hide the flag in shipping and receiving and low privilege areas. And it doesn't really impress them. You can't really pivot to other areas. The problem with cloning, when you do that, is that's next. The problem with cloning when you do that is you're cloning whoever you're targeting. And you're just going into an organization like in the lobby. What are you going to do? Clone the person doing checking? How many privileges did they have? They're lucky if they can open the door behind them, right? So where does that get you? And you're doing a one-to-one target. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to get beyond that. And the reality is, you don't have to be like this super hacker, ninja, unicorn, you don't. Because it's not that hard. You just got to be around the industry and know why they did certain things the way they did, because a lot of it doesn't follow any standard. So you have to have experience in just knowing this stuff. And I'm not a super badass, I'm not the RFID guy, I don't want to be, but what I do is I have years of knowledge I can impart on the audience here, and that's what I hope to contribute. By the way, I don't want to forget to thank DerbyCon for letting you contribute and learn while I'm here. This is just an awesome event, so we'll be back next year. So anyway, when you look at physical access, red teaming, you look at practical physical access. How many people went to Chris Nickerson's presentation yesterday? Okay, not many people, okay, but I decided I'm not going to cover a lot of the electronic part because he covered it and he did it really well. I mean, he's just a really good presenter and really good methods and all of it's fairly accurate. So it's up on the web, go check it out. I'll cover some of it so we don't skip entirely over it. But we're going to go further, because I think that when you go in and try to go and subvert electronic systems and servers and control systems, a lot of times you don't even need to go that far. Wouldn't that be cool? Because like, I'm kind of lazy, or I like to be lazy. You know, my ambition definitely outweighs the effort I want to put in. How many people, like, yeah, right? I mean, it's just efficiency. So we're going to discuss a lot of that. Now, if you do that, let's just say you go attack a physical access control system. They're not card systems. They're path systems. We're talking industry speak here. When you go on site, you talk to physical access people, don't call it a card system. You lose credibility. It's a physical access control system. PACS. Okay? When you get into a PACS, then you can do that in a few different ways. You can target it, you can do port scanning. Again, you know, watch Chris Nickerson's presentation, he goes over this. You basically want to get in where you can go ahead and create change users. But even when you do that, there's a problem. The problem is physical access control systems don't authenticate anybody. Isn't that kind of weird? They're a control system, they don't authenticate. So you go ahead and get into the system, no matter what you do in there, it's not going to go ahead and record. Wow, what am I doing in there? And the reason why it's not a card system is because it has links to alarms, cameras, it's got that, it's that link to everything. And it does a lot of things in real time, like alarms and triggers, it doesn't authenticate anything. Why would that be? Think legacy. Because, you know, if you put internet on there and went down, you have all these doors all over the place, you know, and you don't have Cat 5 all over the place. You need another mechanism that's local. I'll go over that in the next slide, or two, like how that infrastructure functions. So what do you got to do? You can resort to social engineering. There's several methods there. I live in California, so when I have clients, I call it hood effect. Any company that that basically, you know, ends in R or has no vowels except for Y, you know, of course they're really cool. But they're really cool. They make these hoodies and you get them anywhere. And I look just like that, and everybody holds the door open for me. That's like the easiest one I can do. I love that. Everybody holds the door open for me, thank you. You know, but that only gets you to the front door most of the time. And the goodies are beyond the front door. They're like 3 doors deep somewhere. Dispensaries, data center. It's a nice place to get in if you can, right? But sometimes you're not going to get into places by social engineering. It varies depending on the circumstance, the awareness of the organization, their policy, their execution. So I can't depend on that alone, but I probably want to try. So the last thing is the physical attack. Attack the physical components at the access point, or the credential itself. Okay? So I don't say this is the only way to do it, but we're going to focus here, since Chris really has some good information. Social engineering, you can go look in these areas, and we can talk offline about it. But ultimately, you want to go beyond cloning and be able to encode. Why do I want to encode? Come on.
Make your own credentials.
And when I do that,
Access to everything.
well, I'm just not stuck on the person I'm targeting. Right? But how do I do that? Okay, we'll talk about that. Okay? The cool thing about it is that's where you can authenticate, that's where it's dependable. And that's where I'm undetectable. If I clone and they know I clone, they can go ahead and disable that number in the system. Okay? If I can make my own credentials, they can never get rid of me. First thing you gotta know about physical security is mostly security in title only. Okay? So when you look behind it, why? I mean, you know, we get put off because we see cameras, gates, control systems, RF voodoo stuff. But the reality is, look a little closer. You got a lot of stuff going on there. Who's in InfoSec here, corporate InfoSec? Okay, this should scare you, because you count on your colleagues to select technology and implement to protect your assets. Have you ever looked into it? Have you ever asked them what their policies are around keys, key material, what they do, who they buy from, practice statement, audits? Good luck, you can't get it. But it's protecting your assets. I'd be scared. But for the rest of us, that do pen test, it's a lot of opportunity. A lot of opportunity. And we're going to get into that too. Before we do, let's talk a little bit about identification evolution. So, you know, in the 1940s, it was just paper, come through Ellis Island, I'm going to go print something out. There were no scanners or no printers, no big deal. Then, you kind of enhanced it, in the 70s and the 80s, and I'll admit, by the time I was 17, I could pull off a fake ID myself. So, I think the government caught on to that. They got a little bit more advanced, watermarks and stuff like this. So this is basic identification, right? In the recent years, you got government that's done electronic passports. They do have cryptographic keys that are relatively secure. I'll tell you that. But most enterprise entities, I'm talking about when I say enterprise, I'm talking about 14,000. They're not up there with cryptographic keys in the identification plans. What does that mean? It means opportunity. It means room for change. So what's important, okay? RFID, I want to point out there are so many different types of RFID out there. When somebody says, oh, RFID, I can just go ahead and clone while somebody's sitting on next to the couch with me. It's like, qualify that a little bit, because there's like 24 types of RFID out there, and they all vary in security. The problem is that most of it's being implemented insecurely. And that's what we're familiar with, and that's what we're going to prey on. The ones that are a little bit more secure, they do it with flaws. Okay, and we'll talk about, I have a slide later on that gets into a matrix of which different ones are and how secure they are, and we'll get into that. Okay, but keep in mind, it's historically been implemented insecurely. Okay, RFID itself is just a broad variety of information, including smart cards. An RFID credential does not mean it's a smart card. If it's a smart card, it doesn't mean that it does RFID. Okay. So let's get into a little bit of the technology. We're going to get into the weeds a little bit here. The physical card itself, piece of plastic. How hard is that? They all look the same, right? Okay. Then you might have a copper coil. This is what conducts the frequency. When I talk about frequency, it's kind of like tuning your car radio into an FM station. Right, so you tune into a station, you receive whatever frequency is out there. You can hear what's going on. Same thing here. These are tuned to a certain frequency. When you hear proximity, it's 125 kilohertz. Always. Always. Okay? That's proximity. They're synonymous. The copper coil conducts the frequency and the energy to power it out from the reader. I'll go through that. Then you have the chip. Little chip in here. Not this big one down here, but this little chip. That's where the card credentials is stored. Card number, serial number, whatever you call it. Okay? And then the last step is personalizing it. Photos. You don't just see all this stuff. This is a special card where you can see the guts. But you go ahead and print a photo on it, and that's basically what you see. But when you see this, you typically don't really understand the guts. Everybody assumes it's the same. Don't do that because it comes down to the frequency it rides on. Okay. Next slide is all about frequency. The number of bits. How many bits is your card number itself? Then the layout of the bits. And this is where cloning gets weird, because if you're just cloning something, I don't know Russian, but somebody writes me a password on a sticky note in Russian, and I just hand it to somebody who'll accept it. But once I have to start writing Russian for a number of variation, I'm kind of screwed, right? This is where cloning just doesn't really work. The format is the sequencing, the binary layout. And since it's a highly proprietary industry, well, there you go. There's a lot of different layouts. So when I see presentations that just talk about 26-bit, it's not really helping because it's not going to help you in most environments. So the other thing too is the actual implementation of the card. When you get the higher frequency and more secure ones that have keys, there's so many different varieties at that level of what algorithm, how they implement the keys that differentiates all of them. Some I can crack in 5 minutes, some are a lot more effort. Okay? Most of the industry is, I'd say about, well, I hate to give a percentage. Let's just say the majority is still in legacy, 125 kilohertz. It's been around for 25 years. Okay, so that's your first target. Let's explain this frequency stuff a little bit more. Okay, low frequency, think about slow and rolling. Okay, real slow, but it kind of seems fast, right? When I go ahead and touch my card through the reader, things happen fast. There's only 26 to 40 bits on there. It's like not much data. And then it's also trying to pull constantly as I approach. So it's reading before I think it does. So it seems like it's pretty fast. Now on the card, you don't just have a serial number, you have a card number that's encoded on there. 34281, for example. It's not the only one, you also have a facility code, 12. It could range from 1 through 255, by the way. I'm just, for example, using 12. Now let's just say you go ahead and try to encode a card, and you put 34281, but you don't know what 12 is, you're screwed. Okay? Because 12 has to be read before the card number. Okay, and that's what you don't know about clone. You don't know what this stuff is. You can't go ahead and start coding stuff. Okay, now let's look at 13.5.6. Megahertz, much faster. What's the advantage of having a much faster frequency? This is the newer stuff. What's that?
Longer proximity.
Nope. Yeah, you hit it. I mean, I can pack more data in there in a short period of time without performance compromise, right? So basically, I could have a 128. I could have things going on there that I could never have a 125 because it would take so long, or wouldn't even fit on that chip. But you wouldn't notice the performance difference. And on 13.5.6, you have stuff like MyFair, DesFire V1, iClass, Plaid opacity. You know, you've heard of some of these things. Right? This is where all this stuff rides, but it's totally different inside. Corporate building systems, you gotta know how those work. So let's just take this break. Can you guys see this? Pretty well? Alright. I'll point it out. So the first step really is the first part. New hire, you show up to the issuance office, and they say, okay, you need a card. Okay, great. Here's your card. Go. They put you in the system. They create you. They're typically not an Active Directory. I would say less than 1% are actually connected to AD or an IDM. Okay? So, you know, whoever might be Jonathan Smith over here is like Johnny Bad Boy Smith over here. They just make up their own roles a lot of times. And then they enter the card number, that's the credential number, the card number in the chip, into the physical control system. Okay? That control system pushes that number out in hex, goes from decimal to hex, into a controller. Who's heard of a controller? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. A controller is in a wall. It controls like 2 or 3 doors. And it basically does a batch update every night. It pushes that hex out. And when you present your card, you go down here, yeah, the door right down there at the bottom right. You present your card doesn't have any batteries in it. The reader, which is always powered on, sending that 125 kilohertz signal out to this copper coil, powers it up, and then this card just says blah in all directions. Here you go. Here's a binary string. Blah. And that reader doesn't authenticate anything. It's just like, got it, it's passive, and it passes up the controller. It's in the wall somewhere. It's in the freaking wall. Okay, you don't see it. Okay? And you're not going to connect it over Cat5 or anything. And it basically does a match, and it just says, am I in this panel? Do I have a reference for this number that just morphed up to me? And if I do, let you in. Not terribly sophisticated. So if it's on Cat5, what is it? It's called weekend. Weekend, 2 wires. 1 wire for ones, 1 wire for zeros. No controls on it. So that's how physical access control works. And that's why if I go ahead and attack the electronic system, what do I get? I don't get authentication. I go in and try to change the photo, which might be cool. I might be able to go in and take a look and say, what's the card number? Right? But even if I get that card number or change that card number, I gotta go encode it to a new card. So I gotta know how to encode. I can't just clone. I don't want to go hunt that person down and then clone. You with me? So how do these formats work? The data layout. And the chip on the card, you might have a lot. This is theoretical, by the way, because I'm not assuming that everybody here is a programmer. So this is theoretical. Let's just take that same facility code, the same number. In the chip on the card, you might have this representation, okay, a binary string. But when you read it against the controller, it knows which ones to read and which ones not to. So it has parity bits in there. And every different scheme has the parity bit somewhere else. And that's why when you go ahead and you just do 26-bit, you're kind of screwed. Because what happened in the industry, and why this stuff exists, is you have the card manufacturer, and then you had the distributor. They don't sell direct. Then you have the reseller. And the reseller says, hey, I sold all these cards. And now they've run out all these cards they've sold. I've made a lot of money. And they need more. And they ran out. People lost the money to reissue more. Problem is, they're going to somebody else. I need to make sure they come back to me. So the manufacturer said, sure, go ahead and make your own scheme. They'll have to do it to you. Because I'll only sell that scheme to you. So basically what happened was, proprietary formats, once the customer in, not good for the customer, it's channel exclusivity. And that's why you have a lot of organizations that have like 10 cards that carry around. It's not for security. There's no security built in proximity. Nothing. It's clear text. No security. It's all about channel exclusivity. But if you know the data layout, you figure this stuff out. Okay? So the data layout, there's something called format. Okay, the format, this is a theoretical example of format, because some people get a little pissy about showing them real formats. So basically, even parity, odd parity, facility code, card number, and what happens is this template goes into the physical access control system, gets pushed out to the controller. The controller has a reference template that says, I accept these with this format layout. Okay, now I know how to read it. Okay, there's a few different ways you can get the format. You can go ahead and reverse engineer it. It's a little bit of work. It could be fun, but you might not have the time. You could go ahead and get a Proxmark device, but Proxmark only does a few of them. There's a few bunch of them, so it doesn't really help you out too much on anything. Or if you actually go into the physical access control system, it's in there. Go pull it out, it's right in there. So if you get into the physical access control system, use some port scanning, they're pretty insecure, you can go and get it. Or use social engineering way to get it. Whatever you want to do. Okay, it's actually also on the box of the cards that the cards came in. So let's get into a little demo mode. Before I do, I'll tell you a little bit about some tools. So I talked about Proxmark, and I thought about this a bit because the tools have different strengths, different weaknesses. Proxmark, it's a good tool, I think, for hobbyists, for a pen test. If you know what you're dealing with, it could be. If you do some custom development, it can be better. But ultimately, it's really thin on the type of formats. And the formats matter because, like I said, there's a few hundred different formats out there. You go into a Fortune 1000 company and they have 50 different formats, all the facilities around the country, and you're just relying on like one or two, like that's going to be it. You're kind of screwed. So you want to be able to go ahead and understand these different layouts. That's going to be key. So I have Proxmark at home, but I have a different tool that I'll go ahead and demonstrate with. So when I do that, bring up this right here. So let's go ahead and look for your card, right? So this is pretty easy. This has everything self-contained. You're just going to have some, high-level commands, and you deal with everything in decimal, which is really cool. You don't have to deal with waveforms or anything. It does it all for you. It's all in the firmware. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and decode. So this will tell me right here that's 26-bit. Facility code is 101, and the card number is 2344. So that's pretty cool, right? So, but I can go ahead and try to go ahead and say, you know what? I want to go ahead and buy like 100 off the internet. These cards that are pre-programmable, because most of them are. And I went and I read some data off somebody's card. I bumped into them at Starbucks, I targeted them, whatever. I just went ahead and put up what data's on the card in the buffer. If they're a 25,000 person organization, it's pretty easy to follow somebody's Starbucks. I don't tap it on site. I follow into Starbucks around the corner. The bigger the organization, the better. All I want to do is get one read off somebody's card. Because now I have a reference point of what facility code, 13255. By the way, if I have to guess, it's typically 0, 1, or 2. So if you have to guess, just guess that. But what it does is, the lower the bits, 26 bits, it's a lower range of possible bits of numbers that you can get. People are probably better at this than it's like 65,000, 500, 15, whatever, possible combinations, right, against the facility code. When I go to like, 35 or 37 bits, it's pretty wide. So I want to say, gee, I want to be able to go and escalate the higher privilege. So I go read somebody's card through whatever method that you've seen in previous presentations. And then I use it as a reference point, I got facility code. And now I want to go ahead and say to myself, gee, knowing how I know this works, card numbers are typically executed in batches, large batches and sequential. So I would say a attrition rate of an employee card base is typically 15% a year. Given the different type of format that you have, I know this stuff you might not. Well, that format you've probably been on that for 10, 15 years in this kind of ancient. So I'm going to go ahead and roll back about 10, 12 years. 15%, X number of numbers, go all the way back. And somebody who's been there for a while probably has high level of privilege. It's like my method, right? So given that, I go ahead and start programming the cards. Okay, and what I do is I take this one and I go and I say, you know what? Boom. Boom. Done. Right? So I'm going to make myself 100 of those. I'll probably go ahead and go up by like 2. And I'll go down by 2. Got myself like a nice 100 range right there. I'm going to go ahead and take this stack, put it in one pocket. And when I go to their site, and the more buildings on their campus, the better, I'm going to go ahead and start banging their readers. Ones that turn green go in this pocket, ones that turn red go in this pocket. Now the key is don't do too many at one reader. This is why I don't want the replay attack with the branch code with Proxmart. Because if you know physical access control systems, they probably don't have the setting to understand who's banging on them too many times, but they might. So if I just go ahead and go bang bang, green, red, wrong way, right? I got 2. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. I keep using that method. I'm pretty well undetected, and by the end of the day, whatever it is, I got like 40 reads in my pocket. 40! But I've estimated that I've been there for probably 10 years. Okay? Front door, no problem. Hoodie effect. Or, here's my card. Or I go ahead and print my photograph on it and go ahead and code. So if anybody questions my photo, or the front door, or whatever. This is going to work at other doors. These are high-level privileges, right? So it's going to go ahead and probably work in a lot of other areas, because the way they segmented this front door is one perimeter, the next perimeter, then you have sensitive areas. And what I'm trying to do is get higher level privileges in the sensitive areas, the longer somebody's been there. Now, if you would just want to start off targeting somebody, okay, you can do that, okay? Does anybody want to come up from the audience and try their card? I mean, this isn't a canned demo. You want to? Sure. So low frequency? The other thing about this stuff, which is problem with cloning and Proxmart, is Proxmart only handles a few formats, and it only does modulations when you switch antennas and stuff, because you have several different types of 26 bits that can work. This one switches formats pretty good. Let's see. I don't know. Cool. I like that. Yeah, there you go, man. Facility code 113 on this web browser. I can reprogram 14 and something else. Come see me out. All right. So the deal with this is, if you look at tools, there's some tools out there. They all have take and give, like RFIDs doesn't do some things. There's a little matrix. This will be out there to help you understand what things do, how good they are. This other one that I'm using is from Identitive, and it does a lot of things well. It doesn't do high frequency, but all the different formats, all the different modulations. So if you gave me a different card on a different modulation, instead of switching antennas in a science project, I just go ahead and do like a little set mod command, and we'll go ahead and modulate automatically to a different one. And like I'm there reading different modulation. And this has like a whole format library built in. So it takes a lot of the, mad scientists work on it and muscle like that sort of thing. Here's the deal. The deal is when I go ahead and start making cards, and I got some that work, it's different than cloning. Like cloning. Let me tell you about the effort it takes to get rid of this. Because you can't detect it. I look like the user that should be authenticated. Okay? So what happens is I would actually need to go ahead and eradicate that format from my whole population, which means if I'm a Fortune 1000, 50,000 employees, 2 things need to happen. I need to reissue all the cards. I need to go around to every single reader, 2 people to every single reader, like about 5,000 readers across 120 countries around the world. And some of my clients, this is what's happened. How long does that take? 3 years, 2 people. That sucks. And I gotta reissue everybody to eradicate that. Most of them won't do it. But you'll never know you have the problem. That's the difference between cloning. I own you. When you go ahead and say pen test, you can say my name. Who's Breaking Bad fans? I am. That's it. Say my name. That's it. That's pretty powerful rather than cloning. Cloning doesn't scare physical access. You're like, yeah, I know about that. But you know what? Owning them should. All right. So let's get into a little bit about high frequency. High frequency mode is different. It's a different frequency altogether. You can go ahead and do encryption, all that stuff. And the deal with that is you have encryption keys on it, but the way it's implemented is by typically proprietary algorithms. They won't give you the key. You don't own your key. You don't know what they do with the key. You don't know where they store it. There's no auditing. There's no peer testing. Just trust us. So it's kind of dangerous. Most of the time it's a symmetric key. The most bothersome thing about physical access with high frequency when you have a key is that almost every instance, the master key is in every reader. Well, they're offline. They can't check with an OCSP. Okay, it's not a PKI model. It can't be public-private key. So, unfortunately, you get into an industry that has been saying they're security, but how they've been practicing security. They know about key material. Okay. So how they've been protected? Not very well. You come to find out they're using the same key across multiple customers. And the customer can't verify, they can't take control because they don't know what the key is. They don't tell them. And so that's broken. There are some new technologies coming out that break that model, but they're probably about 6 months to 2 years out. So if you get into a pen test, I wouldn't recommend. I don't recommend any of these proprietary technologies that do no peer testing, that tell you to shut up. They have no third-party labs disclosing what was tested, how it was tested. You want to go proprietary, you still have to verify that they're secure. That's up to you. Okay? And that's probably one of the biggest messages that I would get out when you have to make a recommendation from that. Pins. Well, that should stop me, right? Man, just own your cards, but pins should stop me? Not really. I mean, there's some methods where you go ahead and use, UV ink, put it on the door, and then somebody goes and presses it, now you can see the digits. The problem with that method is you really don't see what the sequence was. But, if you got tools like I do, Flirt gun, anybody familiar with it? Yeah, this is a really good one. I can just go ahead and keep this in my backpack, follow somebody, and just hang out, smoke a cigarette. And, 30 seconds later, which is ideal, I just go ahead and press the trigger, boom. And it's ideal because what you get here is you actually see the sequence because the heat from the fingerprints dissipate. You can see which one you press first, which one dissipates. So I can figure out the sequence pretty easily. You kind of have to target an individual, but it's not very hard to do that. So it's a really, really good tool, highly sensitive. There are some scenarios where you have trouble. So if you do a pen test and they have silver, metallic keys, they typically won't show up on this. But I'll save you a little trouble if you're in a pinch, just put a handkerchief or a bandana over it. Because it reflects, it tones the light down, just goes based on the key, which is what it's trying to do. And it takes care of that. So maybe that saves somebody some trouble. So putting it all together, okay? Look, here's what I recommend. Don't just go for the clone. Don't just go for the electronic tap of the physical access control system. Like any other red team environment, okay? Know the business, right? Know what assets make them tick. You assume where they are, okay? Know the people. Who's the CSO? Who's the director? Who are the admins? Who's doing the badging? Where's this badging area, right? Okay, and observe a little bit before you take action. Observe. The other thing too is the attack surface comes down to the number of buildings. Okay, one of my clients has 50 buildings just here in this area. They have 1,000 buildings, across the nation, and they have so many different things going on that if you just try one thing, you're screwed. But kind of watch, like what buildings, what function is in what building? Is it the same format? Is it the same system? Is it leased? Is it owned? If it's leased or owned, it's probably not the same system, right? So what format do they have? It's the same facility code, right? So then and the other thing too is these systems, even though they're installed on Windows nowadays, they might not be on the IT network. So when you go do port scanning and stuff, keep in mind that these physical access control professionals, they started to wade in the shallow end and say, hey, we're going to throw something on the network, and IT's like, whoa, wait a minute, we got to do a bunch of audits and get involved. And they're like, we don't do a lot of audits over here. We don't get into that. So they said, well, we're going to go ahead and do our own little DMZ. And that's that. And so just be aware it might be another network, but it's not a very secure network. You don't have to search for a lot of things because it's the only thing that's on the network. So look for that. That's actually going to come to a head in quite the next couple of years. It'll be a big battle. Okay. And the other thing too is CCTV and cameras. A lot of them are going IP-enabled cameras through wireless, and there's no certificates on them because the industry doesn't really know about certificates very much. So if you're going to go ahead and try to own their cameras and shut them off and point them somewhere else, you're good to go. Get on the network and put those devices, and you'll have a good time. Okay, and card stuff. If they have high frequency Okay? Don't be intimidated. The biggest mistake that I see is, oh crap, they have high frequency. That's an encryption key, I got the algorithm, there's some papers out there, and anybody that has been on low frequency, which is almost all of them first, and they've done a high frequency, what they've typically done the majority of the time is encoded the high frequency with the same encoding as the low frequency. And they already have the readers existing, so they never change the settings. You gotta go out, send people out for years around these things. Now, the bigger the organization, the less they've actually sent somebody around to make these changes. They can't blast out over the network to make sure that it's been done. And typically, even though they told somebody to do it, it hasn't been done. So what I recommend is still target the low frequency. Okay? It's going to be typically the same facility code, same format, same card number. And then what you do is you try that low frequency at the reader because it's still probably reading that same frequency. Because they need a transition time. They don't want everybody out. And since they need a transition time, it takes like forever to turn it off, like years. And then they forget about it. And then even if they turned it off, you now have the format, the facility code, the card number, then go ahead and encode the high frequency of what you need. And you can just start encoding what you found out what you need to find out. I talk to people all the time, they're like, oh, high frequency. I'm like, don't worry about it. Lowest common denominator. Let's think here, right? So, you can be lazy, but you want to be thoughtful. So be thoughtful before you go in. And then, at the end of the day, if you want to go, if you attack the electrical side of this control system, and you change your photo, and you change the card number and everything, you can go ahead and get generally available software that the same they use for the organizations and the enterprise to go ahead and do pictures and coding and all that stuff. So you can go ahead and go that route to use serving like totally picture if you want. Okay. But I would say somewhere in here, make the determination. Don't just rush in and start a pen test without at least getting in here and start making decisions about what your attack surface is and what the approach is. Again, be lazy, but be thoughtful. Okay. We talked about, why is this? Oh, yeah, right there. So I probably have about 5 minutes left. That's before we go off, right? What was that total? Total. All right.
You're the last.
So a couple of things. I left number one off. Some things that are really interesting here. Little story for you real quick. I went to the HIMSS show. How many people are familiar with HIMSS? The Health Information Management Society. It's like 50,000 people go to this. Right? They're all interested in single sign-on, easy access for doctors. There are vendors out there doing single sign-on. So I go there with two-factor single sign-on, using your ID card, so the doctor just goes up, puts it in, and remembers all the passwords and everything like that. So I'm going to these different vendors, and I'm like, why are you using something more secure? Like, it is secure, it's a card. And I'm like, no, it isn't. So, they get all their SEs and they gang up on me. SEs, I'm like, really afraid of this one. I'm getting intimidated. And they're like, what do you know about it? And I'm like, I'll tell you what, give me that card that you have with the demo, right? And I'll actually crack it right in front of you. They're like laughing at me. And I said, no, actually, don't give it to me. Just hold it up. I'll tell you what's insecure about it. And they're all, like this. And so they hold it up like this and lean over. I'm like thinking really hard. And I'm like, okay, so it's this, can I guess it's a static number in the clear? They're like, yeah, they'll look around like, yeah. One guy's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, 56281. They're like, oh my God, how did you know that? I'm like, am I right? And they're looking around, and one person's like, checking in the system. Yeah, that's right. How do you know that? I'm like, because it's right on the card. Right on the card, look at this. But like 99% of corporate ID cards actually have the card number encoded on it. Why is that? Because when they go back to like that fifth slide, when they go ahead and enter the number into the physical control system, they're lazy. They just want to go ahead and look at the card and enter it in because it's vendor assigned. It's vendor assigned, it's clear text, it can't conform to your password change management tool, so it never changes. Vendor assigned, I can't audit it on the practice statement. I don't know where they store these things that they've issued. Okay? It's clear text. It's horrible. It's like the worst thing. Don't use it for authentication ID-based systems. It's like the last thing you want to do, even when the stuff has an encryption key. Don't do it. And there's all sorts of nice little isms in here. So special formats, 2E factors. There's new technology out that's really proprietary that says, since it's only made by us and we go ahead and use a hash and sign the blob, it's only trusted by us and our hardware. Yeah, that means you're freaking locked in. You're never getting away. And it's signed by a CA in a closet that you that has no practice state, you can't audit. Like, that would scare me. And one of the things I'm trying to go ahead and promote here is change, right? So just because we do things differently in physical access, because the environment might require it, the use case might require it, your principle should stay the same. Key material, encryption, audit, standards. Like, that stuff shouldn't change. You make decisions based on that if you want to give some stuff up, okay? A couple other slides here, they'll be on the web, I'll make sure they are. Comparison context matters is kind of the last thing. And that's like biometrics and physical security is pretty good, because of physical security actually knows what a biometric is. But like in the real world, IT systems don't know what a biometric is. So they just encrypt the password in a local cache. And then you go do a comparison and send it back to the application. So if I'm attacking the application, the data store for passwords, and I'm attacking the hash, it's like all the same still, you know? So it's kind of bad stuff. And then, you know, here's a matrix right here of basically all the different types of credentials compared to each other based on standards and level of security. And the thing I'll just point out here is the more standards-based it is, the higher security it generally is, based on the credential world. That's pretty easy to take note of. And a lot of the things that are out there on the far left, in the middle, or downward are the most common stuff. So there's a lot of exploit that you can go ahead and use. And I'll turn it out to, you know, just a conclusion that the industry has basically been telling you, get away from my stuff. I'm going to tell the customer what I'm building because I'm making a fortune. Don't tell me what's wrong. I'm going to tell the implementers and the end users, get away. And that needs to change. So hopefully, I've educated and give you some information. If anybody wants more information, I'm not elusive. I'm around here till tomorrow. My contact information is down there. I'll get back to you if you email me. I want to spread the word around, and if anybody wants to do any training, let me know. I'm up for it. There's a lot more here.